Standing up and speaking out, here's Hal Sparks.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Do the vibes.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I have to say that if I thought I had to do a ton of paperwork for last week's show, it just keeps getting bigger. And for a story with no there, for around Russia, there certainly seems to be a lot of cul-de-sacs with good real estate. We'll talk about today the GOP's welfare bill that just came out, which is, everybody is focusing on it, by the way, as being a tax break.
Going in and out.
Uh-oh, I'm dropping in and out. There's something technically glitchy about our just getting on live today. I think it's me. Is that better? Is it evening out? Keep our fingers crossed. Maybe. I am broadcasting from the moon, so that might have something to do with it. Ultimately,
No.
Yep. Am I keep dropping out there, Lady B? Is there an issue?
Much better now.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully it will stabilize for a moment, and then we will see what we can do to fix it during the break. A lot of people are focusing on the fact that the GOP's quote-unquote healthcare bill, which it isn't even that. Many of you who follow me on Twitter know that the minute it came out, I went through it. I read the Affordable Care Act when it initially came out, the Obamacare bill, and it was 3,000 pages, and it took me all of 4 days to kind of leaf my way through the whole thing. And, there were some repeating sections and some referential sections, but overall it was a drafted bill with a lot of text dealing with variant circumstances that will occur that will require minutia to be dealt with in the law. When you draft a law from scratch, it requires some forethought because you have to sit around and go, okay, but what if this happens? Okay, we've got these people covered, but there's a small group of people who have this issue. Is that something we look past? We find a secondary solution for it? Do we add their solution to stack it onto a new, a previously existing program? Or do we create a whole program from scratch just for that group of people? What's the most cost effective and what will be the most value for the money spent? That happens in any bill, that at least should, when you draft a bill from scratch, when you create a law. But in the case of the Republican Party, almost all of the bills they put forward, and if you'll notice any of the preliminary quote-unquote bills or ideas or budgets they put forward, they don't do any of that. The budgets that Paul Ryan has put forward are basically 8-page pamphlets selling people on the principle of where they're coming from without actually putting the rubber to the road. They put a chart in at the end that's easily serviceable. It's been around for, 35, since Reaganomics essentially, and they'll argue the same argument that's been happening, but they know that once put in place, it will have a damaging effect, so they essentially avoid implementing it anyways, and they do continuing resolutions, or in the case of most recently, they adopt largely a Democratic budget because they know it's someone has thought through it. Now, in the case of the Republican healthcare bill, it's now the PPAHCA, the Patient Protection and American Healthcare Act. POPCA, the PPAHCA. And in the PP bill, which I thought would have been something with Russian sanctions, but in the case of this particular bill, it's effectively a referential bill. It goes through, and in the first couple of pages, and maybe 4 pages, they reference abortion with a lot of language. They reference, quote-unquote, certain aliens and changing the law about who can receive welfare benefits or Medicaid in terms of being an alien, and it creates a separate category, making it appear, by the way, that they're tightening the laws around what foreign nationals who come to stay here, get visas, get a green card, live here, how long they have to be here. They make a lot of linguistic gymnastics about changing that law, but ultimately it stays basically the same. All it does is make the language look harsher in the process. insert the word aliens, certain aliens. And there's a lot of language around the first two parts of that. Completely unnecessary language, by the way. It is as referential as the rest of the bill. It is simply striking paragraphs and ideas from the bills that previously exist, mainly IRS code and Social Security code. And then the rest of the bill, because they never expect any of their followers to read past page 8, is where the rubber hits the road and the Koch brothers get theirs. And it ends essentially eliminating any kind of subsidied support for high-risk groups and focusing very much on health savings accounts, which, by the way, the idea being is that you would save up for your treatment, which is an absurdity. And now they've shifted over to, well, you'll save up for your $25,000 catastrophic deductible. And in doing so, somehow that out, thank you. Somehow that will protect you, in the event that you get ill. Nope, thanks. My son has decided to jump in and say hello. Say hello real quick, and then scoot.
Hello.
Thank you. And then in doing so, the protection on an IRS level, for their friends, for the tax breaks that they're getting, the tax break that they're getting is actually, again, they hide the higher numbers in referential tax code stuff where, like, oh, in paragraph 6, we'll scratch out the word them and add the word they, and that kind of linguistic thing, which seems kind of innocuous, and then ultimately boils down to their friends get a major tax cut. They effectively hide all that by eliminating paragraphs in other bills and other in the tax code. So they just kind of scratch stuff out and go, oh, by the way, this amendment says that we're going to take out subsection D or reference anything past. They change a lot of dates, for example. A lot of the bill is simply moving the date to the beginning of this year, eliminating, this paragraph will be eliminated as of December 31st, 2016. So starting at the end of the fiscal year, going forward, they eliminate a lot of taxes. And in doing so, huge tax breaks. I mean, you're talking about a $200,000 tax cut for the 0.01%. The 1% gets like a 5% tax break from this, and everybody's taxes go up. And the irony of this is that in everything they talk about, the cramming through of Obamacare, like being shoved down our throats, this oddly homophobic phrase that they constantly use in terms of Obama and any kind of legislation going through quickly. And there were hundreds of hours of committee meetings and the like around the Affordable Care Act. It went on long enough where people got to drive all the way to D.C., put on their tricorn hat and their muskety outfit, and stand out on the lawn for weeks on end. So the idea that somehow this is a process that's legitimate, but somehow the Affordable Care Act was shoved down their throats, is an obvious absurdity that's lost on no one. The biggest part of this bill is that effectively it uses people's ignorance against them. It uses the fact that people don't by rote know what certain codes are, what Part 49 is, Chapter 49 of the 1986 tax code is, and it's the elimination of the tax on tanning beds, which is the modification under Obamacare. They get rid of that, but it also affects cosmetic-related devices and a tax on anything that might have a sort of an ancillary drift. You could literally then start writing off facelifts in a little while, because the seeds are laid in this bill to create openings both in the tax code and in the Social Security code. Basically, these are little... It's not just them eliminating protections in Obamacare. It's not just the destruction of Medicaid in a lot of ways. It's that they're getting a crowbar in the hull of Social Security and so that later on they can pry boards loose and let it take on water. I mean, this is effectively round 2 of the idea that you can take Social Security trust fund money and use it for other budgetary constraints and other budgetary elements. Why Al Gore was saying, we're going to put it in a lockbox. We're going to put it in a lockbox. The reason, again, our biggest carrier of debt, not China. They got about 8%. It's all in bonds. We didn't borrow directly from them. We didn't go scratching at their door. They bought our bonds like everybody else because of their value and because of their stability. But the biggest debt that our national debt accrues is from the Social Security Trust Fund. Borrowing on our future. Borrowing from old people to pay for the wars of today. And in doing so, that was one way of saying, well, Social Security's a wreck anyways. And then with this bill, they'll start wedging in there, well, not everybody deserves it, and not everybody should get it. Too many people are taking advantage. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we come back. We got to take a break. When we come back, it's the Hal Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. You can go to halsparks.tv or infotainmentwars.com. Which is my other URL that points to the YouTube page. I bought that a while back just to mess with Alex Jones. We'll be back right after this. Join our chat room. And, of course, you can talk to me on Twitter using the hashtag HSRPM. Am I even still on the air? Are we off? Really? Oh, my God. It died. That's really sad. That whole section was just dead air. Oh, that's great. Okay, thanks. Sorry, Lady B, lost you. Hope that was just at the last second. I'll try to get back online in 1 second. Distracted by my own child. Honestly, and he'll knock. Uh-oh. Why is this not charging? Why is it not charging? I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know why that's dying on me. We'll find out in a second. Gotta love technical difficulties. Yeah, the connection dropped out. I don't know who's listening on the radio. Can let me know if it came back on. I'm coming back up in a second, and then I'll be able to hopefully solve this. That sucks. Dun dun dun. Come on, wake up. Okay, hopefully we connect again. Hello, check, check, check. Hello? Hello, Lady B. Check, check.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I lost you for a second. I don't know why.
It's about 30 seconds.
Okay, perfect. All right. Shoo! Criminy. I got so much to talk about today. I'm going to get all carried away. Yeah, I'm not quite sure when I died in that rant. So, was I in the middle of pitching, like the station ID when I went away?
You were like in and out. I didn't understand the words you said. I was like, English, please, English.
Oh, it was English. It was just digitalish. What? All right. Yeah, I don't know. The battery on that thing was fine. It just croaked out for some reason. Fingers crossed.
This is Tom Hartman, and you're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT.
All right. I'm back, and hopefully you can understand me. Fingers crossed. We're having a little technical difficulties with the transmitter today, but it happens. So anybody who's been sort of following the Russian story from the beginning, the overall narrative that we keep hearing is, well, the Russians used propaganda. They spread fake news about Hillary Clinton, or they puffed up negative stories about her to make them seem worse. But that was the extent of their messing with our election, and that ultimately people voted how they wanted to vote, and if people are gullible enough, that's just life. And Trump wasn't really helped by any of this. It was just, certainly the Russians weren't trying to help him. It was just random. And in doing so, if Hillary Clinton or Bernie supporters are so stupid that they won't vote, or they'll sit it out, whatever, that's just the effect of information in a modern world. Tough luck, that's it. And if it were at that point, it would be something that the American public would have to sort of take on the chin and recognize that, we have a problem with gullibility in this country, or sort of rampant vilification, that we can't have anything. This is why we can't have nice things. But in terms of propaganda, which is really what this is, that's a direct act by a country to mess with another country's election and our democracy. And that should be troubling enough. That in and of itself should be concerning. That the GRU and the FSB were linked to hacker groups who were actively paying people in Macedonia and in Russia, and in some cases here in the United States in facilities owned by the Russian government that the Obama administration broomed them out of right after the election. And money was changing hands for the act of exercising a propaganda attack on the United States. That the vilification of the other side, that the bifurcation of political parties, especially the Democratic Party, was the goal of this particular group, that they were feeding these kind of stories into the body politic through social media and other sources, and even in one case, allegedly getting a story into the FBI that affected how Comey had dealt with a story, literally a fake story from Russian sources presented as real news, and made its way to the desk of James Comey and affected whether or not they made an announcement or not. So a propaganda attack in and of itself is a serious thing and deserves, especially in what we consider the information age, or the disinformation age is what I call it currently, thanks to the sort of rampant flat earthing of YouTube. But if you're going to look at the, how countries interact with each other, this is a serious thing. Propaganda attacks against another country using internal and external sources to plant fake news and fake stories to vilify one candidate and shore up another, while, by the way, clearly favoring one candidate whether it's because they like him or whether it's because they think he will do the most damage, is sort of immaterial. The very act in its abstract. This goes along with why the cover-up is worse than the crime a lot of times when we talk about things like Watergate, is because the act of lying and letting that lie sit without challenge in a legal situation, beyond politics, but in a legal course, lying to the FBI, lying to a special prosecutor, lying to a grand jury, and the like. Why we hold that to such seriousness is because of precedent in law, and that if we allow that to float, people have argument later on. Well, the president got to lie, and he's not a better citizen than the rest of us, and he wasn't doing it for national security reasons. He was just lying to protect his own butt. So if I lied just to protect my own butt, I'm under the same standard. Nothing ever happened to him. Nothing will happen to me. That's the cascading effect. It's a long way, by the way, before it ever hits the public. But what it does do is protect the ruling class and politicians from fear of a reprisal for lying. There's a long distance between the president lied and you or I end up in court and we go, well, the president lied, so why can't I lie? He lied under oath and got away with it. He didn't get found in contempt of court, so why shouldn't I? There's a long legal distance between that in that argument. There's not a long legal distance between that and a senator doing it or a cabinet member doing it. And that sets up basically a situation where a web of lies may have existed to obfuscate. It is now codified in legal protection. That once the president gets the right to lie under oath and get away with it, then everybody else gets the right to lie over it. And henceforth why ultimately Bill Clinton was impeached over the definition of what is. And lying about his sexual behavior. At its highest level, if you can argue for it, it was to protect the law from its own destruction. And in the case of truth in media, the goal of, if you are Russia, one of the things that helps is look at this from the perspective of you're Russia. The United States has sanctions on you. They're also in an adversarial position with you, along with all the other NATO countries and a couple other countries that they have, petrodollar relationships with. That makes it tough for you to sell oil, which is almost all you have, and to ultimately devise a system much like China, which is the goal of Russia, to undercut their own citizenry to the point of living and operating near the poverty line and creating effectively an oligarchical umbrella over dense poverty that creates huge financial windfall for those in charge. Because effectively, if you look at what Russia is creating within their own country, the Russian government is creating, it is effectively the Chinese system without the veneer of communism. One thing that sticks in the craw of the wealthiest people in China who are linked with the Communist Party is the illusion of communism, keeping them from just raiding the coffers daily. They manage to do it, but if they get caught, there's problems. Russia is trying to set up a system where there are no checks on that at all, where effectively there's this is going. Everyone is kind of feeling, because of the relationship to the KGB and the FSB, that Putin is somehow leading the country back to a Soviet level system. The Soviet level system, again, had the illusion of communism. What he's really looking to go back to is a more czarish situation. And the reason why he hates democracy so much is because he's sick of having to be reelected or change offices. All those things about Obama ending the elections, or calling off the elections with martial law and all those are actual considerations under Putin. All the things Alex Jones fears play out in Russia regularly. When we come back, I want to get into why it's beyond this level of criminality, beyond propaganda, beyond language, beyond fake news and stories, to actual attacks on our democracy, material attacks on our democracy. We'll be back. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Lady B, at some point, I'm probably just going to, like, have you play smooth jazz under me while I talk the entire time, just so I know the sound hasn't broken. Just constant sourcing of that audio. So hopefully we're okay. Anybody who can check the radio stream for me and let me know in the chat room, that would be greatly appreciated. It sounds good going into the YouTube. That's always the curious part for me. Thank you, Billy. Thank you very much. Yeah, everybody, we do have the super chat going. Always super helpful. You have no idea. It is radio's good. Okay. Tonight, I'm in San Francisco again. I'm flying up just to sing at the Concert for America LGBT Pride event in San Francisco. And I will be... they asked me what I wanted to sing. And I'm like, yeah, pretty much in any Skid Row your band knows. Half joking, but hoping that they would find something a little more rock and roll for me to sing, in that genre. And yeah, yacht rock. That's the way to go. And just have a blow dryer going in my face. Yes, it is my boat. Thank you. But the best they could come up with was We Built This City. So I'm singing We Built This City by Starship tonight at the Concert for America. All right. Say you don't know me or recognize my face. I can't get the bad dance down, though. I got to work on that. Say you don't care who goes to that kind of place. Knee-deep in the hoopla. I'm actually going to be singing the words knee-deep in the hoopla tonight in front of a group of humans. So, and then the high notes I got, that's easy. But, and then I'm singing, wait for it, a verse of I Will Survive. Sharon Gless will also be there, which is amazing, and I agreed to do it when I found out she was going to be there. That was the tipping point of me leaving my son with his grandmother for the night. And thank you, Mark, and welcome. That's awesome. But
you got 30 seconds.
Okay.
And you have 3 callers: Steve, Donald, and Mark.
Excellent. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be broadcast. They might do pieces of it or something. I'll find out. I always think they should internet stream these things anyways. Who can say?
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back. So, since I was talking about the healthcare bill, we'll take one caller right away because I don't want to keep people hanging on too long who jumped right in at the beginning of this. And I'm guessing, let's go straight to Steve from the Gold Coast because I think he's on with us.
Hello?
Hello. Hey, welcome.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. You raised a number of really important issues. It's tough to figure out exactly what to say. But on this whole question of Trump and Russia, I mean, it's an ongoing story, and I know people, constantly like to raise this point of, we have nothing there. There's nothing there. I mean, I would ask you, just this past couple of weeks, ABC aired a wonderful piece on, Nixon and just how long it took from the Watergate break-in. and it was followed by his overwhelming reelection.
Steve, you're coming in twice.
Oh,
you're gonna have to call back.
So be a little bit patient about.
I hear him just fine.
Going. It's not. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yep.
Secondly, you're dead on with regard to the motivations of the Russians and specifically Vladimir Putin. Now we know that that there was a huge sort of conflict within the Obama administration about coming forward and doing something about Russian meddling, which we knew about very early on in 2015, definitively in August 2016. But again, we have the president, someone who I respect greatly.
Over the air, he's going twice.
On one side of the fence. And unfortunately, that kept him from being as strident about stepping forward and saying, you know what, we have Russian meddling in our democracy.
That's right.
Steve,
we have an audio issue with you where you're doubling up over the air. I don't think he can hear me. Maybe that's it. Steve, sorry about that. We had an audio issue where you were going out twice over the air, mainly because your points were twice as important as mine. But I appreciate the call, and I'll get. Let me address that real quick. So this week we find out. And this is what kind of I was leading up to with that talk, is that the act of propagandizing against a country's leadership is an act of if you want to call it an act of war, that's very overt or whatever, but it is certainly an act of sabotage. And if you look at why would Russia want to sabotage the United States, there's a myriad of reasons. The sanctions are just a start, but on an ego level and on a financial level, competing with us is always difficult for them. Again, they're a huge country with the economy the size of Italy. They have, the average Russian makes $9,000 a year. They are effectively stuck in 1974 America in terms of that, but the people running the place are running it as if it was the Keating Five in 1987. It is the worst possible combination for the financial well-being of the average Russian, and Putin has no reason whatsoever to change that. He benefits from it, and to some degree, he literally shores it up. This benefits. Okay, so we talk about the propaganda attack and why we would want the average American person to and how easy it is to do that. First is you spread stories that have ancillary tactical benefit, meaning that I'll give you a great example. Right now, all over YouTube, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of channels and videos promoting the flat Earth. Okay, and they vary in thematic reasoning between we live under a dome and God put us in a petri dish, and that scientists and NASA want to stop us from believing this because they don't want us to believe in God, so they want to pretend that there's planets. And then there are black helicopters flying a circle around the Earth, and Antarctica is a ring around it. It's like a big pizza, and Antarctica is the crust. And the UN and NASA are trying to keep us stuck in this section. And it actually, if you just were allowed to go over the ice, you'd find it was paradise beyond there, and there's plenty of resources and that kind of stuff. And we're kept in a petri dish by you see the running theme here. You're kept in a petri dish by the black helicopters in the UN and the Rothschilds and Colonel Sanders. And there's a reason why you would foment those kind of videos if you were a Russian hacker or you were a Russian fake news propagator in Macedonia or something. Why you would further those thoughts is because the secondary storyline is we've never been to the moon. Nobody's ever been to the moon. Nobody can go to the moon because we live in a dome or the sky is 10 miles away. And no plane has been more than 8 miles in the air. That kind of nonsense. And it seems ridiculous, but what it does is seeds the story towards we've never been to the moon. And then it gets to the moon landing was fake. And why was the moon landing fake? Because America was faked it so that we could get ahead of the Russians because the Russians were going to go there. And we had to beat the Russians. So we never did beat the Russians. We never been to the moon. That story gets floated within the context of this enormous window of ridiculous videos about the flat Earth, which, for the record, are completely stupid. If you stumbled upon this as a flat earther, you're being an idiot. And there's a myriad of reasons why you're being intentionally stupid. But the ancillary effect is this floating idea that we never went to the moon. And the reason the Russians have a reason for promoting that is that the idea is that America never beat us at anything. This is a seed pod version of the bigger story, which is democracy is a wreck. What we have is better. Look at who's running America. The Hillary Clinton server story, the Podesta emails, Pizzagate, all the stuff that Alex Jones helped foment, by the way, and the story by the extrapolated idea that somehow, for whatever reason, there is an idea that in terms of Alex Jones and that ilk, that somehow what America's doing is the most horrifying example of power grab and destruction. But Russia, you shrug off. And we're going to get to in a second the paper trail, because again, beyond the simple idea that Russia, through ancillary groups and through actual active spy networks that they put up here in the United States, that they set up in Eastern Bloc, in ex-Eastern Bloc countries, and in that manipulation, that idea that they just want Ukraine back, they want sanctions removed, they want to be able to control sections of the Middle East. They have plans for Afghanistan as big as Cheney's, and they would like them, that kind of control. That undermining our strength in the UN, in the world in general, benefits them, even if the person in charge doesn't go their way. If Hillary Clinton had made it into the Oval Office, if they had so strongly undermined her standing where a majority of the public was not just against her on a political nation, but thought she was somehow evil and put forth more like these, the Obama doctrine movies, they would have just scrubbed out his picture, put her in, and put the Clinton doctrine, these Alex Jones movies that they put out that are about your political enemies not just being wrong on merits, but being part of a violent Illuminati, New World Order group that effectively hamstrings the political conversation in the country, so that you can't meet someone halfway if you've called them a baby killer. That once you ratchet it up to that point, and you make that point, it's hard to work it back down to where you have a functioning democracy if that person stays in. And because of how our democracy runs, we got 2 to 4 years of a window of these people that have been vilified and all this stuff still being in office. Trump aside, because I truly believe he won't make it his whole run for reasons we will get to. But insofar as what Russia wants from this, chaos and the undermining of democracy benefits them, even if it's not 100% successful. There is no downside to this. And and in Trump getting in and wanting to ease the sanctions or changing the Republican National Committee's platform to weaken our stance on Ukraine and our protection of Ukraine from Russia, they have a specific financial and national benefit that they will garner from this president getting in versus someone else. So that in and of itself, and that weird action of changing the Republican National Committee's platform to soften our stance on Ukraine to benefit Russia, should on face make everybody who says, whenever Trump goes, no collusion, there's no collusion, no, there's no evidence of collusion. Anybody who says there's no evidence of collusion, that should stand out like a red thumb. More than any other piece directed, because that was a peculiar, specific act, unmotivated by any other thing that the internal workings of the Trump campaign insisted on, that one single change. Why would they do that? Unless they have some, which, that one single change should drive you to stand up in front of everyone and go, look, we're making this single change because this is wrong, and here's why it's wrong. In the same way that changing our relationship with Cuba was an overt presentation by the Obama administration of why they thought that was necessary, why our shift in policy towards Cuba had merit, and you make that case in public. The Trump administration the Trump campaign did the exact opposite. They changed the platform of the Republican National Committee to benefit Russia and never mentioned that it was them doing it or why. So this idea that there's no evidence that the Trump campaign and now the Trump administration is seeking to benefit the Russian oligarchs on a financial level is weak at a start and false going forward. When we come back, I'm going to explain to you why it goes deeper than just Donald Trump and his financial woes, and why there are RICO cases opening up and all these secondary cases that will come home to roost right after this. I mean, there's so much that just in the New York Times article, there was enough to unpack. But the ancillary documents from the NCCIC, the FBI, the NSA, declassified statements by them point to material facts that they didn't just hack in to plant fake news stories or create bogus Facebook groups or get into Facebook groups, but actually to get into voter registration systems. And this is a problem the Republicans have had for a very long time. They don't like voters. They don't like voting. They're against it on a genuine partisan level. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Back on the beat with Dick Kay.
He is a candidate for the Democratic nomination for governor for the state of Illinois. The Honorable Senator Daniel Bliss, who represents the North Side, Evanston, Wilmette, Winnetka. Not Winnetka, right?
Yes, actually. In fact, Governor Rauner is one of my constituents.
Is he really?
Yes, one of his houses at least is in my district.
Not the other 8.
That's right. That's right. One's enough.
Catch Back on the Beat every Saturday from 1 to 4 p.m. only on WCPT 820.
This advertisement is neither an offer to loan nor commitment to funding. Pen funding is a marketing and information
Lady
firm
B,
for
I'm
businesses.
getting,
we needed cash fast. Business is good, but this is an emergency.
We needed some new equipment. The banks wouldn't help us.
Need cash for your business? Call Penn Funding. We help small business stay in business. If you're in business 6 months with $10,000 per month in sales, you probably qualify. Call Penn Funding now. Call 800-860-9003. 800-860-9003.
I called Penn Funding and had my money fast.
Penn Funding helped me stay in business.
Penn Funding helped us grow.
Penn Funding can
help
you grow your business.
I tried resetting the board.
Need cash for your business
to see if that'll work. I doubt it because I can hear myself.
Oh, you mean because of the phone call?
09003.
Yeah, we have so many issues here in the studio today. It's not even funny.
By the way, I'm hearing commercials come my way. So,
I don't know why.
Hey, that's all right. Don't worry about it. I can bring them down on my side or whatever. I'm gonna personally have a tech come in and
safe.
and
Where I
basically
can play.
realign the board from scratch.
And plan for their future.
You'll be able to spot him when he comes in. His name is Hal, and he'll have plumber's crack and a big tool belt. And he'll be under the desk for about 6 hours, but it won't take more than that, I promise. And we'll YouTube the whole thing, because I swear to God I can fix this if I'm there in the. That's it. I'm coming to Chicago. Just plan on it, for God's sake. I'm coming to Chicago.
I need help.
I know. I'm gonna fly in.
Like mine. Like mine.
I'm just how right now they'd say Camden has a cool room, and Hal would say this isn't Camden's right. Yeah. Camden will definitely run around with a pair of pliers, just unplugging everything.
(763-9278).
Welcome back to the show. So, Grizzly Step. That sounds cool, you know? It's like with Guccifer, which, by the way, everybody says Goocifer when they talk about the Guccifer 2.0. Guccifer is a play on Lucifer and Gucci, meaning, you know, snazzy. It's not Goocifer. There's no goose aspect to it. When it's pronounced, it should be pronounced just for the, you know, let's point to the direct idiocy of what they're trying to do. This is like the kind of person who, you know, has that kind of new money Trump-esque view of the world, that if it's not coated in gold or has some sort of like labeling feces all over it, then it's no good. So Guccifer 2.0 and Grizzly Step was I guess the code name for a joint analysis report, a JAR, put out by the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. And it provided technical details regarding the tools and infrastructure used by Russian civilian and military intelligence services, the RIS, to compromise and exploit networks and endpoints associated with the U.S. election, as well as a range of U.S. governmental, political, and private sector entities. The U.S. government is referring to this malicious cyber activity by RIS as Grizzly Step. Previous JARs have not attributed malicious cyber activity to specific countries or threat actors. However, public attribution of these activities to RIS is supported by technical indicators from the U.S. intelligence community, DHS, FBI, the private sector, and other entities. This determination expands upon the joint statement released in October 7th of 2016 from the Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence on Election Security. This activity by RIS is part of an ongoing campaign of cyber-enabled operations directed at the U.S. government and its citizens. Okay, so this is just one of the reports put forward in response to the Russians hacking our elections. Now, in this, they've got dummy charts, which I'm holding up on the YouTube page so people can look at if they want. But basically, they show a sort of a little maze work of how the hackers themselves enter a system, what they do once they get information from a system, and use that information from one system that's less secure to get into a more secure system. This is basically standard operating procedure when it comes to, you get these stupid phishing emails that says, your account is going to be shut down by Apple if you don't sign in. And then what it leads you to is not an Apple page, but a fake Apple page. By the way, never respond to those. If you say, we need your password to get it, like that, it seems silly, but people do it all the time. And when people do it who are volunteers for a campaign in the upper level, that's how they get the podesta emails and that kind of stuff. Now, the easiest thing to do, and what they discovered they could do, was you take political, like the podesta emails, for example, things that you know that no one will confirm or deny the full aspect of it, because if they say, yes, those are my emails, it confirms all the targeted documents' contents. When you can't actually do that, and let's say someone broke into your email and they downloaded every email you've ever sent, and in every 30th email, they added a sentence about your ex threatening their life. And if you and then they released it on the internet. And if you confirmed, if you said, well, I didn't say that about my ex, you're confirming that you said everything else. And so usually in a political situation, it's to deny that that's real at all. You have to just say, we're not commenting on whether this is a real hack or not, or yes, they hacked in, but we're not commenting on the documents that they're releasing. Because if we did, we'd have to spend all of our time going line by line through these, confirming and denying things. And what you do is you know that there are uncomfortable things or things that make them look bad, but aren't necessarily criminal, but you can tack in things that are borderline criminal because the lack of denial makes it all look real. Super easy to do. It's a trick you can that people play. The simplest version of it is someone sends you an email. You reply to their email, and in the reply is their email. You go into the part that's their email, and you add a sentence. And in your email, you write back, why did you say that in the second paragraph, though? And they'll look at it and go, I didn't, what? Where did that come from? And they'll momentarily have it's a prank. But if you do it over tens of thousands of emails, you can create an artificial thread. Okay, so we know that this is something the Russians did. This is, and in doing so, by the way, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security's white paper on this includes signatures, meaning pieces of code that you can track, and I'm holding it up again on screen so people can see it, the pieces of code that you can track that if you got email or ISP information related to people getting into systems that has that signature, that's definitely a Russian server within Russia. There is a definitive link to malware and violence to your system coming from the Russians, period. End of story. We know that's where it came from. IOC is associated with RIS cyber actors are provided within the accompanying point, the CSV files and the STIX files of JAR 16-202-96. So they give one little version of it, but with this, when they send it out as a warning to states, attorney general, and secretaries of state saying, look out, they're coming for your election systems, they provided them with code to look in their system and make sure that none of this shenanigans were going on. Meanwhile, zero response necessary from the secretaries of state. So if you're Chris Kobach and you know that the Russians are effectively helping Republicans get elected, you have zero motivation to actually do anything about it in this cycle. You have the signatures in case later on you decide they're helping Dems this time just to throw a monkey wrench in your system and create more chaos. But for the most part, if you know you're the chaos agent, if you know you're the on the side of Donald Trump, and you know that wrecking ball is on your side, you have no reason to stop it from swinging. So while it provides you with these tools, it does not have a mandate to use them in any way. When we come back, I'm going to, I'll address, that the Obama administration put out an executive order dealing with this. They also put out a declassified statement on Russian hacking, the scope of it, and what they were expecting. And ultimately, the story about it just being stories is false. The biggest fake news about the fake news story is that it was only a fake news attack. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. I'll learn to say that in Russian eventually, I suppose.
Listen to the Norman Goldman Show, where justice is served every weeknight at 5 on WCPT 820, because Natalie, facts matter.
Thank you guys so much. We'll just dance to the commercials.
The cargo ship, that the much larger cargo ship that struck the Fitzgerald.
A deadly heat wave in the southwest has firefighters grappling with 18 large blazes in the region, including 6 in Arizona and 3 in California. More than 1 million acres of land have been charred. The Fry Fire, burning 70 miles northeast of Tucson, has consumed 30,000 acres and is only 10% contained. Officials in China fear at least 100 people were killed after a landslide buried homes in the southwestern part of the country. I'm Ann Cates. The weekly addresses have focused on health care.
President Trump says health care will be fixed this year, and in the weekly address says going it alone may be the only way it's done.
My administration will never stop fighting for you and for the health care system that you deserve.
The Democrats' Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono says the just release plan by Republican senators on health care doesn't fix anything.
It sends a simple and clear message. If you're young and healthy, you'll be fine. If you're poorer, older, or sicker, well, you're screwed.
Pat Piper, Washington.
Melania Trump is 2 weeks into her new life as a full-time Washingtonian. So far, she's staying true to her reputation as more homebody than social butterfly while fulfilling her duties as First Lady. Job one has been settling an 11-year-old son, Barron, the first boy to live in the White House in more than 50 years. Mrs. Trump says she's enjoying White House life so much, she's not really missing New York. I'm Ann Cates.
You're listening to Chicago's only independent progressive talk station, 820 AM WCPT Willow Springs and 92.5 WCPT FM DeKalb, Chicago's progressive talk.
It's a time to arm yourself with facts. Don't just bring good ideas to a nice fight. Bring facts to a fact fight. Honestly, if we hate our conservative brothers and sisters, it's going to get ugly. We can't hate them back. We have to use humor and facts to remind them what it was they voted for.
You're listening to WCPT 820, where facts matter.
This is WCPT's Art of the City. We let you know what's happening in the theater, music, and visual arts. Coming up on Thursday, June 29th, the Alphawood Gallery at 2401 North Halsted presents Then They Came For Me, an exhibition examining a dark episode in U.S. history when, in the name of national security, the government incarcerated 120,000 citizens and legal residents of Japanese ancestry during World War II.
It's funny because every time I think I've got a
is steeped in
like
Chicago history. Thousands of previously incarcerated persons resettled here after release from the camps, and they built a vibrant and rich Japanese American community that lives on today. And the Chicago story forms an important part of the exhibition
irony
and its message. This
important we're talking about this in terms of, it sounds like a conspiracy theory because the Trump organization was involved.
Perspectives, engaging visitors in critical discussions of the story of injustice.
But there's a lot of material connections. But there's no conspiracy theory in terms of the Russians actually messing with our election.
Mortgage rates are at all-time lows.
Because that's not a conspiracy. That's a foreign government acting on our election.
Thousands of dollars a year.
There's no conspiracy theory around it.
And the place to call is Lending Tree.
The conspiracy theory where it comes in at all is whether or not the Trump organization had any connection to what that foreign country was doing, what Russia was doing. Was there a conspiracy between Trump's, both him and his campaign staff and his transition staff and the Russian government and Vladimir Putin?
Lending Tree right now. NMLS.
That's the only part where a conspiracy thought is necessary. Their attacks on our country are fact.
800-470-0270. Again, 800-470-0270.
Mike, my water broke.
Wait, really? I'll get the bag.
Mike, hurry!
Should I grab baby's first letters or counting is fun?
Now is not the time.
It's the best time. Research says read aloud from birth and
Get me to the hospital right now.
It's never too early to start reading to your baby. 15 minutes a day will accelerate brain development. So read aloud 15 minutes. Every child, every parent, every day. Readaloud.org.
Save $10K on your new Hyundai at Grossinger Hyundai of Palatine. I'm Tobin Oberhauser, General Manager of Grossinger Hyundai of Palatine. Don't drive what you drive, love what you drive. And who doesn't love getting the maximum value for your trade-in? And saving $10K on your new Hyundai. Save $10,000 on 27...
Look at that. I think the commercials went away. Did we fix that? Lady B, is that us coming back a moment before? It made me check my connection like,
people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at housefarms.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn puss-faced little pimp stick. True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
So before we went to break, I mentioned that there is zero motivation for the Republican Party to stop the material interference by Russia in our elections, because currently it favors them. There is, and beyond Marco Rubio's warnings that it could be them next time, none of them believe that. There's no point where they think that somehow at any point in the future that the Russians are going to go, you know what, the Democrats in office would be better for us. That's not going to happen. And the Chris Kobachs of the world know that. And the long lines at the polls and all that kind of stuff already, you know, you almost don't need Russia's interference in actual voting machines to make it worse in this country, because secretaries of state across the country guarantee that the poor and impoverished in their states get fewer voting machines, that if indeed their votes are counted at all, or they try to force ID laws without providing for those IDs to be distributed or given to people who, especially the disabled, for example, who would have to travel to do it, and that extraordinary cost is not made up for in any way by the state saying, well, to guarantee your right to vote, and since we are insisting that you have a photo ID, we will make up for the fact that you have to go get one if you are poor or impoverished, or you can't go about getting one, or we will mail one out to you, or you will be able to pick one up, or you will be assigned one based on your Social Security number, or any of those other elements. They don't do that. They say you have to have one, and then especially people who are way older who don't have their birth certificate. There's umpteen stories of them being disqualified. People who are, in their 90s and have been voting for decades, suddenly not having the ability to vote. And in terms of them wanting voting, let's be real clear. Paul Weyrich, and many of you listen to Tom Hartman have heard this quote before. I played it before on my show, but it bears repeating. This is one of the guys who started the Heritage Club. Now, the Heritage Club is one of is the group that handed Donald Trump his list of lawyers to present as Supreme Court justices, and he's basically cribbing off that list. It's more work he doesn't have to do. As a lazy executive type, he just doesn't feel like he should have to do any of the actual grunt work. So if somebody's going to just give him a piece of paper to go, yeah, check one off here, it'll make this particular group happy, you'll be done. You don't really have to defend it even. You can just say something like, very respected group has said, these are people who have thought very hard, good American patriots. And this is Paul Weyrich.
What I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Okay, so that's Paul Weyrich, who's one of the founders of the Heritage Foundation. He was one of the Moral Majority. One of these big proponents of anti-big government. We got to make government smaller. And one of the ways they're going to make government smaller is make the number of people who can actually vote in an election smaller. So there is no impetus if you found out as a Secretary of State of a Republican state. And by the way, this is why the big push for Republican governorships, why they've been pushing so hard to get Republican governors everywhere, is because they end up appointing Republican secretaries of state. And most of the time, that becomes part of the plan overall. So, okay, so going forward, there's no reason why the Chris Kobachs of the world would in any way fight back against finding out that there's code written into attacks on the voter rolls in the states. And there are. The new reporting comes out that the DHS and the and Homeland Security and the FBI and the CIA all have information that they hacked into successfully at least 19, if not more. These are the ones they know about, again. 19 states' electoral systems, getting information on voters, including Illinois. And in Illinois specifically, they took 90,000 voter. They managed to get 90,000 voters' personal information, including their driver's license number and the last 4 digits of their Social Security number, in Illinois alone. Now, when you go to vote, you go in there, and especially if you need an ID, you say, okay, here's my address. This is what gives me the right to vote in this precinct. This is what allows me to pick my congressman. Now, remember, Republicans have been redistricting areas to stymie the poor and specifically the minority vote in areas and garner bigger counts for wealthier, more affluent areas and certainly more white districts. And basically bifurcating and subdividing the minority vote in a lot of different areas. And then when they do show up, there's fewer machines, and the idea is that people will try to vote, all this fake voting. This is the big thing. We got tons of fraud. We know there was fraud. We know that 3 million people voted illegally. This is what Trump is floating or whatever. Okay, what would be your evidence that they voted illegally? Well, more than likely, they voted in the wrong district, or that they came to their polling place and their ID didn't match the voting rolls, that they're trying to vote in their old place with the illusion that if they tried to vote in the wrong place, they probably voted in the right place too. Okay, so they voted twice. This illusion. We know at least 3 million do that, and they float that number that mainly because it was the difference between them and Hillary Clinton winning, but also as this overall, like, we knew it was illegal. We knew those were, this was voter fraud, and we know there will be voter fraud. Well, one of the ways you know that there will be voter fraud is these indications that people showed up and their ID didn't match what was listed as their address where they were voting. Well, we now know that the Russians were breaking into voter rolls and switching digits in people's addresses. Basically, the simplest work they can do is that if you live at 251 Johnson Lane in Owensboro, Kentucky, they just change it to 521, and they take out the H in Johnson and move on to the next one. You show up, your ID's for a different address. It looks weird. Or they change the name of Owensboro to Owensburg, and someone will go, this isn't your polling place, you're in Owensburg. And then you argue, and then that slows the process down. And then we get all these reports of machines don't work, and the machines are down because there's a flaw in what's going on. That there's, that something's wrong with the deal, and then they have to go to paper, and then the line gets longer. And this only happens in districts where there are large number of minority voters or specifically Democratic-leaning areas. And we're supposed to believe that's an accident. I don't buy it, and it's an absurdity. And again, when you have the Republican Party on one hand arguing against voting for 50 years, if not longer, but specifically going back to the civil rights era, and then adding on top of this, the Russians are not just sending fake stories, but are materially manipulating the voter rolls so that when someone shows up, if they do have a photo ID, it doesn't match their listing in the paperwork, and they're either sent away if they can't take off, if their boss is giving them a couple hours to go vote, and or they have to pick up their kid from school, or any number of things where people without child care are forced to kind of mitigate their time. They can ratchet up the difficulty for working class people and the poor and minorities to make it hard for them to vote just on a Secretary of State level. And then they're effectively assisted by any Russian meddling. And there is no indication that this has stopped, that the information, that they got from these hacks actually had any, the systems themselves have been corrected, especially in states where there's a constant effort by the Republican majority in the state to disenfranchise minorities, where there's an active, virulent strain of Republicanism that leans, more hard right. That the denigration of people and the vilification of people, that's where that ideology and that hatred and that vitriol actually materially functions, which is the limitation of these people's ability to vote. And now we find out that the DHS, the FBI, the CIA, the DNI all say they managed to get in. They managed to get in, not just telling stories, not just faking news, not just presenting ideas or helping WikiLeaks get Podesta emails and then maybe modifying those emails before they're sent out, and then feeding the Pizzagate story and fluffing it on Facebook to reach a broader audience, and operating basically a clickbait enterprise. But beyond that, ended up being an active, a passive measure to cover the fact that there were active measures going on within the voting system. And if you're waiting for Republicans to ever guarantee the right of any individual to vote, I beg you to find a Republican in any position of power who's taken active steps in the last 45 years to guarantee the right to vote for anyone. Because you won't find them. We'll be back right after this. And how I think this is, I want to make the case that there is a huge difference between how Russia, who Russia is, and they're playing in this, and what China wants to happen in this country, for example. There's a very distinct difference between our adversarial relationship with China and our adversarial relationship with the Russian government, because I do make that distinction. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT820.com. Ugh, this stuff makes me sick to my stomach.
One minute.
Thank you. Are things stabilizing, Lady B? You sound a little harried. Are you okay?
Yeah, we got the HTC guy here.
Okay.
Yeah, because things are overheating on the master control room.
Ah, master control. Always a problem. I knew I never trusted him ever since I saw Tron.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hopefully he can cool things off over there, and maybe things will start working again.
Is the heat really bad there right now?
Well, when I walked in at 4:15 in the morning, it was like 100 degrees in there.
Oh my gosh.
Managed to cool it down to 87.
All right.
This is all I can do.
Yeah. Well, that's manageable. I mean, I can iron my pants with my laptop when the show's over. So.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Okay, so China's big insertion into the American system is not a direct attack on our democracy specifically. It is almost as if on an honor level they're beyond that. What they do is they steal all the inventions. They basically undermine our patent strength in the United States, which is the financial underpinning of the entire country. And they make dummies and knockoffs of nearly everything. They do a lot of industrial espionage, and they do it with government approval. And they funnel stuff through. They create situations where tech people are inserted in places. They feed that stuff back to the a private organization that's actually run by the government, and then they feed out those things in an attempt basically to have net control over manufacturing, especially of high-tech items, for example. And they do this with great regularity. This is not a mystery. There's been tons of stories about this in particular. But the difference is that, we heard recently that they arrested some people who were looking into the conditions at a factory where Ivanka Trump's shoes are made and the like, or whatever. And these are protesters who are protesting how Chinese workers are treated. They were arrested. They are alive, though. And while the Chinese government is not above disappearing people, it is usually in more extraordinary circumstances, and quite frankly, one that the right admires in some ways. They're notorious for, if they find someone guilty of being a serial killer, shooting this person and billing the family for the bullet, that kind of stuff. And there's a portion of the right here that it has a kind of an undying respect for that part of it. They have a wish we could kind of an idea. But when it comes to Russia, if you'll recall, the report, the reports that came out that Russia was messing with our election. The White House signing under Obama signing an executive order December 29th, stating that by the authority of the President of the United States and the laws of the United States, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, I, Barack Obama, President of the United States of America, in order to take additional steps to deal with the national emergency with respect to significant malicious cyber-enabled activities declared in Executive Order 13694 of April 1st, 2015, and in the view of the increasing use of such activities to undermine democratic processes or institutions, hereby order, and he goes through a process of what it means to qualify for under this order about tampering or altering or causing a misappropriation of information with the purpose or effect of interfering with or undermining election processes or institutions. Subsection E of that. Specifically, what we found out later was the intel that they had at the time. Now, that got released, got white papered about 10 days later. I think on somewhere around January 16th, 10th to the 16th, this stuff started coming out. If anybody recalls, on January 26th, about 10 days later, after this story came out, that America knew that they had targeted this, and that Putin, the story that came out this week, and that the Washington Post has put out, that Putin knew and was directing personally the attacks on our election. And not just the malicious, fake news storyline idea, but actual attacks via hacking on voter rolls and voter registration in the country, in at least 19 states, if not more. And they knew that Putin directly was ordering this. And that meant, at that point, when they released this information, or when this information came out, and again, this just made news this week. But the idea is that the information that came out around January 10th to 16th was actually anybody can backtrack to, if they knew that, it had to be somebody in this room. This is the same problem when Trump said, when he gave classified information to Russia, just by knowing who doesn't know stuff, the Russians can figure out it was Israel right away. That's why you don't share information that's classified without going through a briefing of how do we share some of it without letting them know the source, and why it endangered the life of someone who Israel had inside ISIS, and who is, in theory, most likely dead now, and certainly burned as an asset if they've had to leave or escape or what have you. And in the case of Russia, 10 days after these reports started to come out about the material hacking, they started, like, in a minor way, they started to come up in the news. You might recall this story coming out on January 26. A senior Russian intelligence officer and cybersecurity investigator arrested last month on treason charges allegedly was passing information to U.S. intelligence services, according to Russian media outlets. Sergei Mikhailov, who worked for the FSB, the successor to the KGB, was arrested in December along with Ruslan Stoyanov, a top manager for Russia's largest cybersecurity firm. If you recall, Sergei Mikhailov is the guy who was in a meeting with intelligence officials in Russia and had a bag thrown over his head, and he was removed from the room. Consider that for a minute. So the information, I find it very hard to believe, and maybe this is just how Putin operates, but that if all we were getting was the story of fake news that they had Macedonian hackers and other people working with the FSB, and that story managed to get out, and that Putin had said yes to it, that this would be this overt a warning. Because it was meant to be a message to everyone else. When you do it that way, when you don't go to his house at night and take him away, that's how you do it, and how the United States, quite frankly, does it a lot of times when they arrest somebody, because they don't want to make a big deal out of it or make people think that our government is so porous. So they, if they find someone has been dealing in illegal activities, they arrest that person in a private circumstance and isolate them, basically making the case that nobody else here is involved in this. This is the person we know is guilty. We're not warning everybody. We don't have to use this as a warning to keep other people from snitching on us. We just arrest them because they're doing something bad. In Russia, they bag your head and drag you out of the room as a warning to everybody else who's in that room. Loose lips sink ships. And to anybody else, by the way, who might be listening. And again, Ruslan Stoyanov was allegedly a private individual working as for a Russian cybersecurity firm. Two other people, including Major Dmitry Dokuchev, an FSB officer, was arrested in connection with a case, according to Russia's REN TV. And the fourth person was not identified. That person's just gone. And by the way, what did Stoyanov, what was his major activity that was going on? Stoyanov allegedly developed a program introduced into a prominent bank's computer system to gather privileged information on customers. That information, it reports, was then sold to the West. So Stoyanov, his specialty was getting your info from a bank via hacking. Now think how much more secure banks are than our electoral rolls. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Yeah, insofar as the Republican health care bill and who's voting no and who's voting yes. The clear story on it is that four are saying they won't vote for, they're not sure because they're trying to mean it up a little bit more. There's no reason to believe that McConnell and his ilk won't make it meaner, by the way, in process. And that the people who are saying, I'm not sure if it hurts more people, I can vote for it, will just come along anyways because they're afraid of their constituencies. They live in red enough states that they have to kind of go along with it. In the shuffle, the question becomes, if they gain those four, or two of those four, they will lose 3 or 4 of the other side. And that's the hope. Because it is a vacillation between too mean and not mean enough. It's not a vacillation between constituencies. What's important to constituencies, for example. And so it's sort of a nerve-wracking concept. That's the balance, that's how it works out. And if anything, this should call BS on that nonsense about there's no difference between the parties. Because that argument I find disgusting. Yeah, integral destiny. As far as messaging, there's an essential challenge to progressive messaging that the right doesn't deal with, and that is a question of kindness and cruelty. That ultimately, what you're arguing as a Democrat most of the time, or as a progressive or as a liberal, is that the policies of the other side are cruel and will harm people. And you are arguing for the weak or the people who don't have another recourse, right? That in and of itself lacks sort of the macho benefit of tough love. And we got to be strong. And the languaging of it, even though, why do you have to be strong? What's strength for? Strength is for protecting people who aren't strong. If everybody's equally strong, why do you need the strong? What's the big deal about being a hero if everybody's their own hero? That kind of idea. And so, we got to come back. It's...
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
So if you haven't read the Washington Post's mini novel on called Obama's Secret, what's the actual Obama's Secret Struggle to Retaliate Against Putin's Elections Interference, and effectively it boils down to two issues that the Obama administration was up against. Is that if they dealt with, because of the idea that perception is more important than reality, especially when it comes to sales, and a campaign is an act of sales. It is an act of selling your idea. You can have all the material facts you want, but what you're presenting is those material facts going forward will benefit. And the other side can go, no, those material facts going forward will be a negative. And so there's an argument there about the future which no one can know. One side can postulate better because they're using facts, but if those facts aren't appealing because they have too much reality in them, they will sort of lose the argument. That balanced intelligence, the argument for the fact that we landed on the moon is full of science and actually entails, first of all, obvious, you could show tape and goes, there we did it. And they can go, that's just fake. Well, the idea that it's faked is actually sexier than the reality of us landing there because we take the landing for granted. We don't think of, it's like watching Hidden Figures and going, okay, if you believe the moon landing was fake, you believe that those women helped nothing happen. That there's all sorts of ancillary benefits to believing the moon landing was faked on a level that, like, there weren't any black women who helped with the calculations that got us to the moon. That's an absurdity. That's even more proof that we've never been on the moon because black people couldn't help us do it. That's absurd. Like, you have to understand the ancillary benefit of just fighting the flat out news. Okay, so the news comes out, like on a 24-hour news cycle in a campaign mode. Everybody's in sales pitch, and so the Obama administration was in a tough situation as far as selling the news. You had Trump on the one hand saying they're going to rig the election, they're going to rig the election, they're going to rig the election. And so it makes it increasingly hard for the Obama administration to come out. The Russians are trying to rig the elections for this guy. Yeah, we're trying to fight back against the attempts to rig it on his behalf without looking like they're helping their own Secretary of State become president. Had it been a Republican president who didn't like Trump, they could have arguably made that with a level of support that otherwise wouldn't be there in the thoughts of voters. But the Obama administration was making kind of calculated decisions along the way. Like, look, it looks like Hillary's going to win. So if we push this too hard, it might tip those scales as it gets closer and closer. If we look like we're putting our thumb on the scale, and this is why, as a propaganda push, it was a successful attack, because Trump is his main tool is the use of accusing your opponent of doing what you're about to do, so that when they come back, it looks like schoolyard attacks on you as opposed to a legitimate critique. So when you're about to do something, claim that your opponent is already engaged in it. And then if you're caught doing it, you can go, well, yeah, we have to. I mean, we're not going to be caught with our pants down against this person. That's what they're doing. So the Obama administration is in a bind because already they're ice skating up a hill against an electorate that I personally believe on a material level has been poisoned against them by the mainstream media. That this overarching from Fox News, the obvious source, to the Bill Presses of the world, writing these kind of to the critiques of the Obama administration, vilifying them as if they don't. Instead of just saying I don't agree with everything they've done and I have respect for the presidency and I actually think we're moving in the right direction, that the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that getting Obamacare through, that those kind of things were valuable, but we need to go further. Instead of having that conversation, you have people like Cornel West saying we have to hold the president's feet to the fire, which is a torture reference, which is odd considering that black people were burned that way during slavery and after. Using that language about this the first black president, knowing that he's ice skating uphill from day one against Mitch McConnell and that group, and blue dog Democrats who said, 11 of them, effectively saying, if universal health care or Medicare for all is anywhere near this bill, I will stop it in committee. And by the way, we just had the speaker of the Democratic speaker of the California House of Representatives, the state house, basically shelve the universal health care bill in committee and not let it move forward. Exactly what the Blue Dog Dems said to Obama they were going to do if he made that a possibility in the Affordable Care Act. The bill, 100% of the bill goes away. Everyone it's helped, everyone it's benefited. That none of that happens if you put this in here. You can put trigger points all you want and hide a movement towards it, which is exactly what the Obama administration did, which is why everybody's freaking out on the right and why they don't want it to move forward, why they've been in such a rush to shut it down without ever actually having a plan to fix it. But understand that a Democratic House leader in California just did exactly what Max Baucus threatened to do during the Affordable Care Act. Okay, but did that land on Max Baucus' shoulders? No, it landed on Obama's. And so for years, they were already dealing with this, that all the blame went their way, none of the support. And now many of the people who are saying the Republicans are horrible for trying to unfund and the Medicaid expansion and all this stuff on the left largely vilified the Obama administration when they were trying to do this in the first place. So the conversation was already slanted in one direction. So the Obama administration's in a tough spot. If they look like they're just shoring up their own candidate and arguing, in the schoolyard way, oh yeah, well, they're rigging it for you. No, they're rigging it for you. It undermines the entire thing. So they were up against it basically leading up till Election Day, and all the polls were saying, you know what, Hillary's going to win. She's got a good lead. And then all of a sudden, she does win by 3 million votes, but all these states where there were crucial districts, she didn't win them, and she ended up losing the Electoral College. And now we're finding out that the Russians were successful in hacking into the voter rolls, downloading and manipulating at least 19 states' voter information, including specifically 90,000 voters in Illinois that we know of. So at what point do you say our voting system in the United States must become a protected class of infrastructure, a special aspect of infrastructure? You must realize that there is a danger to leaving it open to attack. And in doing that, in recognizing that fact, federalizing that protection, shoring up our elections, and making sure that everyone has access to the ability to vote. Every citizen, if you're worried about illegals voting or what have you, whatever your bone to pick is with what you think isn't fair, ultimately, each individual in this country over the age of 18 who's not a violent felon has the right to vote in this country, and that vote should be sacrosanct. It should be protected, because what are soldiers dying for if not democracy? What freedoms are actually expressed if indeed no one gets to vote? What good is free speech if the electorate it affects can't actually express the ideas that it is heard, digested, or has conflict with in that free speech? And at what point does a Second Amendment benefit you if ultimately you are simply left to protect yourself no matter what the circumstance is? That while you are, stocking your homes with AR-15s to protect yourself from the Chinese or immigrants or low-income thieves and murderers that you expect to be coming down your driveway, all the while you're being killed by toxins in your water or at your job because the real threat is something you could have or should have voted about and had an actual impact on. That a bullet will never save you from heart disease. And defunding the CDC and defunding the National Institute of Health it has a much higher chance of leading to your death, your premature death, than the chances of you being attacked by even a violent criminal, much less a Middle Eastern terrorist in your own country. But that requires voting and active involvement in the political structure. And all the while, you're being allowed to stockpile weapons to your heart's content. But eventually, when it comes time to pick your leader, if you don't meet the financial threshold that month, that day, or if the Russians have just decided that even though you would vote Republican, you live in in a purple district that they can't chance will go one way. So they're just going to grab all the voters there and shuffle their names so that when they show up to vote, the line is so long that even you're standing in line, yours might be fine. You might be one of these people who could vote. But so many people's in front of you in lines, information has been gacked up by a Russian hacker. You have to go back to work. And if you don't believe that will ever affect you and you think you can kind of dodge that and you're okay with that happening to the country, what kind of patriot are you? What does Arlington Cemetery mean to you? What does the flag mean to you ultimately? Because you're basically just arguing for the Cayman Islandsing of the United States. You're fighting for the 0.01% to get a $220,000 tax break so that you can't possibly get health insurance. Statistically, you're just not in that group. That's why it's the 0.01%. And it has to mean something to you. At a certain point, you have to go, you know what? I believe deeply in my Republican values. I believe deeply in personal responsibility and all these elements. But I draw the line at the Russians messing with our election. I draw the line at our federal elections being open to any hackers at all. Because if the Russians have done it because they have a political bone to pick, understand that there are people who are simply chaos agents worldwide who don't like the United States and don't want it to have any strength in the world because they blame it for any number of war crimes or what have you, or just simply hate capitalism as a structure, or don't like us on a racial level because we're a diverse country. We don't like the fact that women can vote. And so they have an impetus to do the exact same thing. And if they look at how Russia did it on the cheap, why wouldn't they fight back in the future? So the shoring up again, even if you're for Russia, you like its oligarchical, anti-gay, locking people up for pride marches, gun limitations that they have where you can have any gun you want, but they regulate the bullets, which is what Russia does. If you want to go hunting, you have to register how many you're going to shoot while you're out there and bring back a list of the ones you didn't use. If that means something to you, if you actually believe Russia's a better system, go live there. That's fine. White Knights had an ironic title in some ways. But if you think that ultimately all the elements of the Lee Greenwood song and all those country songs you like about freedom in this country mean anything, what they mean is you let us make our own familial mistakes. We can fight amongst ourselves, but we don't vilify other Americans. And we fight to protect the consistent and honest elections. And if you don't believe that, are you really an American? That's your question. We'll be back right after this. I'm not taking calls currently because of the phone bounce back that we had. I apologize to anybody who held online or who's holding online. We've been trying to fix it, but it's got a rebuff, so it'll just be me yapping and talking to the chat room for the next little chunk here. I appreciate your patience, and I apologize to anybody who's been holding on. The phones just aren't working today. We'll be back. Quick question for the crew here. I have to pick our Noir Chiller movie, YouTube available movie today for crooks and liars. Any suggestions? Ooh, that's a Noir Chiller horror. Hold on, I'll go ask my mom real quick. Mom, what's your favorite noir thriller movie? Like, that we've just been watching lately on Turner Classic Movies? Think of one.
They always show the Boston Blackie ones,
Uh-huh.
the serials,
Uh-huh.
and I like all the Thin Man stuff.
The Thin Man. Okay.
And a lot of Clark Gable's earlier shows.
Okay, well pick one. Just one. It's the Thin Man or okay.
I like the first Thin Man.
The first Thin Man movie. Okay, cool. All right. I'm gonna wait a couple more minutes. My mom says the first Thin Man movie. Drift. She likes the Boston Blackie movies as well. 1934. Let's see. And then she likes, let's see. The Complete Thin Man. Come in. By the way, at the end of the show, guys, I have to race. Okay, thank you. I have to race to the airport to get to San Francisco. I'm flying this afternoon.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. It's now time for the happy ending.
So, first of all, I want to start this one with a little bit of, like a bit of a promo. There's a program that I got involved with that helps kids with learning called Drawn to Discover. It's drawntodiscover.com, spelled just like it sounds. And it's pretty cool. You can go to drawntodiscover.com/Hal Sparks, and it's my own little kind of link or whatever. But you can kind of just look there, and it basically helps kids learn through drawing and the acceleration of that drawing to because how your brain adapts to drawing and creating lines and then writing. It's almost the thing missing that we don't teach cursive anymore. Everybody thinks nobody writes in cursive, so we don't teach cursive anymore. It's the same mistake that a lot of people make when they say, well, you don't need to learn algebra because you'll never learn it. You'll never need it later in life. But ultimately, by learning those things, by learning how to deductively reason and answer from limited information, you learn basically objective thinking, and you learn what you don't know in a circumstance. But it also helps shape your brain for problem solving and critical thinking. Math is great that way. Drawing can be the same way. So Drawn to Discover is a new program for that or whatever, and I've become involved with it basically because I support the idea. And so I recommend everybody check it out, especially if you got little kids, or if you have it, if you know anybody who has a little kid, you can gift them a membership on there. But it has a program for over time teaching your kid, to accelerate their learning through drawing and other creative outlets. It's pretty great. Like I said, I advise you to check it out or whatever. That's my little 2 cents. I just think that's awesome. It's part of the happy ending this week. That being said, like I don't. The happy ending this week is a curious circumstance we find itself in, is that after the election, I think a lot of us, were apoplectic that Trump managed to get in. And I think it's becoming increasingly clear that if we're finding out now that the Russians got into voter rolls and manipulated those things, and then we find out that an RNC computer had voter information for basically every voter in the country. And I think Rachel reported on this a little bit. Basically, they dumped the voter information for almost every voter in the country, and it's effectively in a hidden URL. This is from 5 days ago. This is the amazing part. Okay, so, and when this happened is crucial. June 12th, let's see. UpGuard cyber risk analyst Chris Vickery discovered the open database of 198 million voters on June 12th, and it was secured on June 14th. So 2 days, the Republican data firm Deeproot Analytics and 2 other Republican contractors, 3 total Republican contractors, leaked information including names, birth dates, addresses, voter registration details, and social media posts of 198 million voters. About 1.1 terabytes of data was available to download and not password protected for 2 days. If we find out that the Russians were effectively hacking in, again, no collusion, but think about this for next week's show. 4th of July is coming up, and it's a good time to reflect on what your patriotism means. That we find out the Russians are trying to break into voter rolls. They get into at least 19 states. They get 90,000 voters information that we know of in Illinois, including the last 4 digits of their Social Security number and their driver's license, which means also their address and their name, what party they're affiliated with. But it turns out all that information, and this was early last year when that they had done this, we find out that June 14th, as the election is heating up, heading towards the RNC, that 3 Republican contractors posted the voter information for all the voters in the country in an unpassword protected, unsecured server. Is there an email anywhere that says this got sent to anyone? A wink and a nod, a phone call, part of the recorded message that that Michael Flynn delivered to Putin. Are we yet to find out that all 198 million of those voters' information is on a Russian server somewhere now? And is your voting information going to change anytime between now and the next 2 elections? Because if not, if there's no modification and you haven't changed your address or any of those things, there's a very strong chance you may run aground when you try to vote next time. Because even if the Russians were trying to get this information, the Republican National Committees and 2 of their private companies associated with gathering info for them released it onto the internet for anyone to get. Anybody could have gotten that stuff. And if you don't fear the Russians or the Chinese, understand that the North Koreans can have it. Because if WikiLeaks has it, which I'm sure if it was up and word got out, they gathered it as well. Understand that. This is the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks to everybody in the chat room for joining us this week. Thank you, Lady B, for suffering through the technical difficulties we had today. And thanks to everybody who gave us some money through the Super Chat today. And, of course, our Patreon, patreon.com/HalSparks. I appreciate it more than you know. You're really helping the show and helping us grow all the time. So we'll see you guys next week. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. And remember what the 4th of July is about. It's not just a barbecue. We'll see you next time. I love you guys. I have to run because I got to go catch a plane and go sing at a big Pride event. So thank you, Lady B. I'm sorry Johnny wasn't here to pick up the pieces when I went hashy for a little bit. We'll
Sorry about all the tech.
That's okay. You know what we should do is we should find an alternate for the weeks Johnny isn't here. We'll get somebody else local. You know, I'll get one of my other friends to come in and be there in that week so they can talk with me. We'll figure it out. But I got to run. I got to go catch a plane. You're lovely. I greatly appreciate you. I want you to know that. And I'm sorry you've had to deal with a super hot server, if you know what I'm saying. And it wasn't in a restaurant. Okay. I'll talk to you later, Lady B. Bye-bye. All right. Signing off. And I got to run. And you guys are great. And thank you so much again. And we'll see you later. I got to go. Okay, bye.